The person you just divorced is going to have to live in the same city as you for up to the next 18 years if you have kids together. The question today is, can you get out? Welcome back to Uncontested. All right, Stacy. So the question of the day is, if you are in the state of Florida and you're getting a divorce, you have kids involved, you live in the same city, and you want to relocate once the marital home is sold, for example, what are their options?
Well, your first and best option is to convince the other person to let you go because the odds of it happening are pretty low. There is a statute that completely identifies how you can move and when you can, or not when, but how you can move, if all the factors would have fallen in your favor. But ideally, you convince the other person. And unfortunately, usually you can't.
There's a lot of ego involved in the divorce, as we've talked about. This is uncontested. You're probably in a highly contentious divorce situation. So you're not agreeing on a lot of things. So if the other parent doesn't agree, what does that look like?
You're pretty stuck. So there is a statute, it's 61.13001, and it delineates all the factors that you need to move. I think we've discussed about, factors before with child support, or not child support, time sharing, and how we balance that out. Well, this is kind of the same. You're going to need to go through all of these factors to determine if they weigh in your favor. And it's normally not even just weighing in your favor. It has to be that much more, because you're looking to take your kids potentially to the other side of the country. I mean, what if you're saying Florida to California? First, that's not a simple car ride.
Right.
You're looking at airfare and the expense of airfare, and what if you have more than one child, and what's the age of that child? So you want to look at all of these things in order to determine if you can move. And one of the first things people consider is the cost of this. Is this even feasible? If you are in a low income contested divorce, the odds of you being able to say, well, we can definitely get little Johnny from Orlando to San Diego 5-6 times a year on our budget is probably not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I can also see where the ideal situation is that you can co-parent 50-50, because the presumed custody is 50-50. So you should be able to share that kid relatively easily, which means you got to be close together. That makes sense.
Right. I mean, even when you're not in the same county, they can order a 50-50 parenting plan. It makes it unbelievably difficult when there's traffic involved and times involved and parents work. How do you get there half of the time? Imagine now trying to argue that, the other parent is going to still be able to see little Johnny a substantial period of time, but I'm on the other side of the country.
Right.
And that's a huge one.
Okay. So I know in my dream that I thought I was walking into when it came to my divorce, when we were sitting down and trying to fill out those papers ourselves, highly don't recommend. There was a dream of like, okay, so you're moving over there 6 hours away from where I am. So what happens if I get a promotion? Like my goal was maybe I get a promotion and I have to move to Denver. Now he's in Atlanta and I'm in Denver, and it's been a few years. Like life's changed a little bit. How does that work?
So it would be a lot easier in your situation, or a situation similar, right? Because you already have one parent who's long distance, and that makes it that much easier. And more likely that parent would agree. But if they didn't, all those factors are going to wind up heavy in your favor. You're already here. The kids are with you the majority of the time. Employment is one of the factors. Do you have a much better job opportunity? And it's not just a job opportunity, right? So we get this a lot. People come in and say, well, I'll make a lot more in California or Colorado. I don't know. But, let's assume for purposes, California they have a higher minimum wage than Florida. They, on paper, get paid more. Well, sure, you might make more. That same job that pays 15 here might pay 23 there. But do you have an offer? right? I mean, are we just assuming I can work for XYZ company in Florida and I make 15, I can work for XYZ in California and I make 23? Well, that's all well and good, but do you have the offer? So if you're getting this promotion, you want to have all of that ready to go. As you've discussed before, preparation is the key to success, right?
Documentation is going to help out a ton, I'm sure. So my understanding of this is and my situation is completely different, so you'll probably tap in here. But if say my ex did end up staying in our city, right, and I did want to go get that promotion, if he says no, it's highly unlikely that a judge would approve me.
It's less. So as we keep going backward and having more reasons to keep kids in the county, in the area where they are. And when we talk relocation, we're talking in Florida, it's 50 miles by the way the crow flies.
Okay.
So we have a radius, right? If we always assume, right?
Right.
Let's assume. If he is attending sporting events, then now we have a contact that is more substantial. If he is time sharing, even a 60-40, if he's 40% of the time, that's a pretty substantial amount of contact. These are things that they're going to consider because your move is going to negate that ability to go to extracurriculars. He's not going to fly from Florida to Colorado to go see your kid's game, right? It's just not possible unless he's extremely wealthy. That you're not flying back and forth multiple times a week. So contact is the most important,
and that's where the time sharing log is going to be important if that's a situation you need to be paying attention to. Okay, have you ever seen where people move and they get like a slap on the hand, or like what happens if they were to move and they didn't say anything or they didn't ask, they didn't get approval?
So if there is an open case and one parent picks up and leaves the state, it is an emergency order for pickup. And we apply to the judge and say they've disappeared or they've run away to their parents' house in Arizona. This is where they are. I have contact with my kids. And the judge will sign off and you'll be able to get your kids back. You cannot relocate without permission of the court.
Okay.
So all day long. And that is a huge fear for people. They ask all the time, I don't want to hand over passports, or I don't want the other person to have access to their birth certificate and Social Security because I think that they're going to go and not come back. Well, they have to. Now, I can't say if they're going to run to a country that we can't pull them back from, that we can't stop. Or at least I have yet to have that happen.
Right. That's
so
very far-fetched.
That's never happened in my career. And I'm sure it does. And I'm, in small amounts of cases, but it's never been mine. But parents who do, we put that in parenting plans, right? We say that if you're going to travel to a foreign country, you have to provide X amount of days notice. So maybe it's 30 days notice. And then as confirmation of that plan, we also need a full itinerary, maybe hotel stays or cruise confirmation numbers. And then you want flight numbers so that you feel comfortable with them going. But in every case, there's a relocation requirement. They just can't pick up and move legally. I can't stop somebody from committing murder. I can't stop somebody from kidnapping their kids. But, outside of legally, they may not do that.
So basically, you need to be okay with either potentially running into your ex at the grocery store because y'all live in the same city, more than likely, right? Or at least within 50 miles of each other. Okay. Definitely interesting take. What other questions what are some other things when it comes to relocating that you see?
So a lot of people will say, but my kid wants to live there. Well, how old's your kid? And
right.
Does a 5-year-old have a preference? And we've discussed this before. I don't care what a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old wants because they don't pay the bills. And they have 13 more years before the government even recognizes that they have rights. So
Oh my
their
goodness.
preference does not really matter. Is there a difference between a 5-year-old and a 16-year-old? Yes, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Things that have come up that might weigh in, because preference of a child is considered, but again, we're basing it on age. If you have moved in the last few years from another, or couple years from another state, maybe, and you want to go back, maybe then if you have a 16-year-old and all of their friends are up there and you want to move back and all of the other factors are in your favor, then little Johnny's opinion might matter.
Yeah. Okay.
Because all of his friends are there. And that's part of it too. What relationships exist in this other place? You can't just say, all my friends are there. First, we never want to say my.
Mm.
Because at the end of the day, it's still best interest, right? So it's all about little Johnny, not you.
If I recall, because I was willing to move, like my ex had already relocated, and I was like, okay, well, if we sell the house, then can I move back to Georgia? My parents are there. You know, we have a support system. Here, I'm all by myself. Like I've built a village. So those are some of the things that we could consider as making sure that we're talking about what's the benefit for the child if we were to relocate.
Right. And that's where people get stuck in their head, because they say, and you know, they say, like you just said, I have a really good promotion. Well, that might be true, but just because you have the opportunity for a better job doesn't mean that your kids' lives will benefit.
You know, a lot of people will blanket and say, yeah, because you're making $200,000 more a year. Does that really mean your kid's going to have a better experience?
It doesn't. We don't know.
Right.
Are you pulling them out of the school that they've known for 9 years, away from all their friends? What if you have family here? Now let's reverse that. What if they're not doing well in school here?
Okay.
And they're struggling or there's special needs and they don't have the accommodations. But there is a special school in Colorado that might be able to help your daughter or your son. And in that same city, you have a giant support system. And a support system probably isn't a friend that your daughter or son met 8 years ago when they were born. It's somebody who's consistently in their lives, because again, it's not your support system, it's their support system.
Yeah, because as an adult, you should be able to pick your emotions up and support, move through this tough grieving time, because you really are. It's all about making sure that your kids are comfortable. And as parents, we signed up to make sacrifices, right? So it's not about us. It's about making sure that the next, 18 years, we're just going to keep going with 18 years, is what they need.
Right. And that's what the court will look at too, is your reasons for moving. Is it just because you need support? Again, that's my problem. If you can put my in a sentence, it's probably not great. That's not going to get you there. You need to be able to say how that affects your kids. And if it's, yes, a better job for you, but that's only part of it. And I have this opportunity to live right by this school that is great. You need to be able to show that they can get into the school if it's a specialty school.
Yeah.
That maybe you contact the teachers, and would you be able to have somebody testify on your behalf if the other side is obviously arguing about it. One of the ways that you might be able to sell it, because we always talk about cost, right, is to say, I'm willing to agree to all of the transportation. I'll because if you have, so again, we discuss how, there's always a mom who said, I'm not letting my kid fly on a plane by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, would you put your children on a plane right now?
No.
Say, good luck. No, I wouldn't. I mean, sorry, this is just personal, but I wouldn't either.
Yeah.
And my son's about to be 14 and I don't feel comfortable with that personally. But another parent might say that they are. Well, if you're the parent wishing to relocate and the other parent says, we're not putting our kid on a plane alone. Well, maybe the selling point is, I will fly both ways. So you're looking at 4 flights, though,
right,
just to get your son or daughter in the circle. And if there are ways to sell things, but it's
those sacrifices we just talked
Right.
about, right? As a parent, and I've done that for my stepson. My ex, I flew him there, flew him back, flew him there, flew him back, because we didn't want him to be by himself, and that's That's a whole nother layer of stress, but you've got to be willing. Is that worth your new life and your new place?
Right. And then cost, right? So yeah, you might be making $30,000, $40,000 more a year, but if you're spending $10,000 a year in airfare,
Is it worth it?
I don't know.
Yeah, you would have to decide that. And what I'm hearing today is a lot of this is, you know, defining whether or not the decision would be logistically and, how do I say, logically smart. I say logistically. I mean, I think that both means the same thing. Emotionally, sometimes we make decisions with emotions, right? I just want to move back there because da 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 da. And that's kind of what we've talked about the entire time, is really just getting down to the facts of this is how it would benefit my kids. Look up the statute that she mentioned. I don't remember that number whatsoever. I be Googling stuff. But look it up and say, okay, so how would this move benefit my kid in regards to all of these requirements of the statute? And go to your co-parent and say, this is what I'm looking to do. This is why it would be beneficial. Because the hope is that once the divorce is over, the heat is off, things simmer down, and you guys can have a conversation. Sometimes that's not the case, and then you've got to go to the judge. Because if the parent doesn't agree, then we've got to go to court and say, I would like to pursue moving more than 50 miles. We need time-sharing logs to show that maybe the co-parent that's stuck around doesn't see your kid as often.
Right. And that would be a huge part of it too, right? If that other parent's not even involved, then there is a chance that the court would order you to move, especially if you can say, we'll timeshare. He can have our son the majority of the summer.
Yeah.
We can do 6 weeks in Florida, and it's the same amount of time he's exercising now.
Right. And we've talked about dictators, right? So maybe you've divorced a dictator, and they did everything possible to get all their custody, and then you still need to be documenting that time sharing, because just because you live in the same city and you ended up with 50-50 custody at the divorce hearing doesn't mean you can't go back a couple years later and pursue that relocation or that time sharing change if you've got facts on your side. Would be
Right. If the person's not exercising what you agree to, and that happens a lot of times. You know, we did it for reasons that are, tenfold. But if the other person's not even exercising time sharing, and a lot of people won't bring it back to the courts because it's expensive just to relitigate. They just say, okay, I have whatever child support I'm dealing with now, and I'll keep my path because I don't want to go back to court, but I get the kids more time anyway. But now if you want to move and you don't have any family around, and there's no big differences in the school, and you have a job offer in another city, and in that same city there is a multitude of friends and family you could be around, then there's a pretty good argument for relocation.
Yeah.
A bad argument is, I just don't want to be here because I hate him.
Yeah, you gotta be okay with potentially bumping into him in the produce section if you're gonna get divorced and stay in the same city. I mean,
It's going to happen.
it's gonna happen. Yeah, we live in a real small town.
Right. I mean, in other cities, obviously, there's a much greater opportunity to remain independent of each other.
Yeah.
In smaller towns, it's going to be tight for
But sporting
a very long
events,
time.
right? I think the healing for you, we go back and watch the rest of the episodes, is it shouldn't bother you to see that person whenever you go to a co-parenting event, because it's a business deal. Now, this is our investment. This little person, this big person, however it is, they're our investment mutually. So maybe I haven't always liked all of my coworkers, but if you could put them in that category and say, I do what I got to do to get my paycheck, right? I do what I got to do to mutually pour into this investment, and then I let it go and I don't let them bother me. That's probably your best bet. What else haven't we touched on when it comes to this?
So one of the things you cannot do, and this has come up, before too, is to try to move because you just think there'll be more assistance there. And that comes up a lot as well, especially when you live in a smaller area, a smaller suburban city versus a larger city where there is a fluctuation in salaries, or if if you're getting a lot of government benefits, but not enough. And you say, well, if I were to switch states, a different state may offer substantially more. I don't know if we have expensive housing. Maybe New York offers free or reduced housing costs that you might not have in a small Florida town.
Okay.
Right? Or if they're at capacity, or they say, you'll be on a list for the next 8 months. We might have Section 8 housing or other government benefits, but it takes a long time to get them. You're like, I can get over to this other state and I'll get them the first day. That's not an argument. You would think it would be, but it is not.
Okay.
Because it's not a definitive thing that's going to happen. It's you're projecting, you're assuming that I will win the lottery if I get to this other place, but you can never guarantee.
That's the crystal ball theory we talked about, right? We can't predict the future. We don't know what's going to happen. So what does one do, right? Maybe they lost their job and they're homeless now. I mean, how does that? Have you ever seen that?
It is. It's tricky.
Yeah.
So, but we at least in our office, we try to educate people. Say,
okay,
look, and we've discussed this before, is that the minute you divorce, no matter what, your life is going to change.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that it's not. And if you're forward thinking and you think my income's going to reduce from A to B, apply right away for any benefits if you qualify for them. And there's opportunities across the board for things like that. At least in, our area, we have education help. If you need daycare assistance, there are programs and people don't realize it. We have to tell them, say, you can get help. You might have to pay out of pocket for 30 days before it kicks in, but it will kick in. And what you think is $1,200, $1,300, $1,400 a month might only be $500. And if you're on a time-sharing parenting plan, with the other party contributing, then that reduces that even further, and then it's feasible.
Okay.
You do have a 50-mile radius. If you are the parent whose school designation, they use your address for school designation. And I'll say that, I'll put a footnote in it, but you have a 50-mile window. So maybe 30 miles away is more feasible for you. Consider that. But as far as the school, I say that because if you're not the parent and with the school designation, the other parent is, that means your kids are going to stay in this county going to school based on his address, and you might be the parent who's 40 miles away. And now that is very difficult to exercise 50-50. I know people say that they can, but it is so much harder because you're talking about, if it's 40 minutes one way and then 40 minutes back to work, and then at the end of the school day, 40 minutes in and 40 minutes back, that is a boatload of time on the road. You're talking potentially 3-4 hours every day just driving.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine, when him and his ex-wife split, it was an hour that they lived from each other, but the way that they split their days, because we've talked about this before when it comes to 50-50, like you can do the whole every other weekend thing, but I want to say it was like he picked her up on Friday and dropped her off on Monday. So it worked out to where like she was with mom whenever school's in session and she's with dad whenever it's not. I don't know. Those are some things that maybe you could work out in your parenting plan.
Right. It makes living further away easier.
Yeah. That way you don't have both parents trying to take them to school every day. It's just what works. It's for the kid, not for you. But if that works for the kid, sounds like a good thing you might want to consider for your
But it is
plan.
something to think about, because before you solidify an agreement, you want to consider relocation, because like we just said, it is very difficult to get court approval for it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you, as we've said a million times, if you can agree on it, then agree on it.
Okay. Got a question for you. We agree on it. We're not going to go back to court. How do we make sure that one day the dictator, who's decided to wake up from their slumber, right, doesn't come out of the woodwork and decide to say that we've been doing our own thing for a while or something like?
So you want it in writing, just like everything else.
Okay.
And you can put, even if you can find one location right? So maybe you agree you can go live with your mom in Georgia. I will agree to that relocation. If you know you're going to live there until your kids are 18 and that's the way that you get there, then go for it. But if it's that specific and you move, then you have a problem, right? But if you know what you want to do and you can get it, just as long as it's in writing, you're safe. So we've done it where we name a city. So you can relocate to Bangor, Maine, and you have a city, and you can move within that city, and then you're fine.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not a specific address, or you say, I want to live here, and I can live within 20 miles of this address, and that won't be considered an additional petition for relocation.
Okay. And is that we do it together? We get Stacy to write it up? We go get it notarized together?
So these are, we're talking post-dissolution?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a supplemental petition to modify or a consent amended judgment. You can do it any way you want.
Okay.
The court just wants to make sure that you've agreed. You want to make sure that you've agreed, and
Right.
you want to make sure you have it in writing.
Okay. I dig it. So what I'm hearing, right, is first and foremost, if you're both staying within that 50-mile radius, get ready. Make sure that you wear not pajamas to the grocery store if you don't want your ex to see you in your grocery, because they're going to be close by, okay, for the foreseeable future. But you're not necessarily always stuck in that predicament, depending on if you're putting your kids' needs first, and you can get your other co-parent to agree. And if they don't, then we need some logical facts to be able to present on why it's a good move. And we don't move before we have approval from everybody, because that's a no-no.
Right. Definitely don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
And then if for whatever reason your divorce is finalized and you guys can come to an agreement on something, you can always go back to your attorney and have a modification filed with your custody or your parenting plan or whatever. So there are options. It's just they'd have to be kind of, how do I say, special circumstances.
Right. And you have to be able to substantiate them. I can't tomorrow wake up and divorce last week and say, you know what, I really want to live in Hawaii. Let's go. Not happening.
We should have thought about that before we went to trial, right?
Right.
And even then, that probably wouldn't have gone over very well in trial.
Not at a trial.
No.
Can you agree to everything in advance? Sure.
Right, because you can agree on anything in a divorce as long as you both agree, but you're contested for a reason. So, yeah, get ready. Get your ducks in a row. Get your documentation ready. Anything else you want to leave them with this week?
One quick one is just because you remarry doesn't mean you get to relocate either.
Ooh.
So maybe we put that on hold and think about future marriages to discuss at a later time.
I love it. Foreshadowing. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Uncontested. Go back and catch up and let us know what you want to see more of. We'll see you soon.
Things are truly better with us.